everyone, and welcome to a bonus episode of Grip Locked. Mainly, we were originally planning to do this one pre all the news that happened today because we realized we're dum-dums and forgot to talk about Kevin Jones yesterday. Kevin Jones announced over the weekend that he was headed to Innova. They actually announced it on a DGN
It's a really cool commercial.
Yeah. DGN did not have the audio going. It was basically a FaceTime with Kevin, just explaining that he was going to Innova. And then the Disc Golf Pro Tour also posted Instagram video of him like taking a jacket off with Team Innova on the back. And then Innova finally posted that Kevin Jones had joined him on Innova. So we were originally just going to talk through a few different of the reasons that this could have happened mid-season. And then the news story got even deeper with Väinö Mäkelä announcing today that he's also left. Well, Väinö didn't announce. Prodigy announced that they said goodbye to Väinö. Väinö has also left Prodigy, which then cracked this whole thing a little bit more open. Because originally, a lot of the speculation that was going on with Kevin was it kind of made sense. His performance has not been up to snuff over the last few years. It was weird it happened mid-season, but it was like, okay. There's probably some way that maybe it was mutual. There was a lot of speculation and just there's a lot of ways that move could have made sense. Right. Väinö Mäkelä was the move that made a little less sense. And the two of them together painted this picture of what's going on at Prodigy. Yeah. And it led to a bunch of rumors starting and all that. So Trevor actually reached out to a source at Prodigy that I think we can name.
Yes, Kale LaVisca.
So we talked to Kale and got enough information to clear the air.
I like you making me the one to out it just in case.
I was just making sure I didn't talk to him, so I wanted to make sure final on air we had, because I was fine just going.
Classic journalism.
To make sure that to get a bigger picture story on what is going on behind the scenes, because there were rumors out there of, oh my word, Prodigy's going bankrupt. Prodigy's selling to House of Discs. Is Väinö Mäkelä the last of players? We can put all of that to rest. So I'll let Trevor explain basically what Kale said, and then we will react to it, and then we'll also look at Kevin Jones with Innova, and we can kind of, where do we think Väinö's going? Because we don't know for sure where Väinö's going. We have some estimates, some guesses, but we can talk through that side. But Trevor, why don't you go ahead and walk us through Kale's explanation of all of this?
Yeah, so basically what I was told is a little while ago, Kale is brought into a call, including the owner of Prodigy, and they are discussing, I guess, their budget. And what it comes down to is the leader of the call was like, hey, when we're looking at this Kevin Jones contract and this Väinö Mäkelä contract, these are two contracts we did towards the end of 2021 when things were booming. Disc golf was just flooded with money, and that's when they were done. Obviously, things have slowed down since then. They just could not afford to keep these contracts on the books any longer. And at least, from what I heard, at least it was known that Kevin Jones, there were performance clauses and some other marketing clauses and things that allowed them to get out of this contract. But it was something that they didn't do just for the sake of it. It wasn't like, Kevin, you're not up to snuff, we're out of there. There was a budgeting reasons behind this. Kale wasn't certain on Väinö's situation, but he thinks it also was related to performance issues that allowed them to get out, and a similar kind of story. Now, the interesting twist is, which I actually give props to Prodigy for, is the owner of Prodigy, I won't touch the table, the owner of Prodigy actually reached out to Dave Dunapace at Innova and negotiated the deal for Kevin Jones, or at least got it set prior to letting him go. So the owner of Prodigy wanted to make sure that Kevin Jones wasn't just getting tossed out. He created a landing spot for him, which I think is great. I mean, they couldn't afford the deal anymore. It is what it is. But I think it says a lot that they wanted to make sure Kevin Jones had a place to go. And I think as a player, if the owner, I would be bummed out. But at the end of the day, if you don't meet your clauses and they have a good reason, I'm at least happy that they cared enough about me to act in good faith and prepare that for me. Now, Kale wasn't sure for certain on Mäkelä, Väinö Mäkelä's landing spot. He had some guesses, but I'm not going to throw that out because there's no confirmed facts. So we can kind of just speculate on what that could be. But that's kind of the rock solid information we have is they had a way to get out. They needed to get out financially. It was just something they didn't want to have on their books any longer. but they were able to create that Innova landing spot for Kevin Jones, so that as soon as he was away from Prodigy, he was with Innova. So that's what we got from Kale. It was awesome of him to share that with us, to get the facts on the table, because once again, Prodigy it sounds like they were in a situation where they just had to make a move for their finances, and did what they could, I guess.
Yeah, no, so let's unpack it a little bit, right? We kind of talked about this in the heat of it back in 2021, 2022, of like which company is going to get themselves in over their head, right? Because you could see the writing on the wall of like disc golf had unprecedented momentum that could not keep up, right? I think everyone knew that. But when you're entering these contracts with players, especially like lucrative contracts, which we can assume Kevin Jones and probably Väinö was, considering the reasonings for leaving, when you're entering these contracts, there is risk on really both sides, because Prodigy, business-wise, it made a lot of sense to put, hey, you have to meet these certain standards if we're going to pay you whatever the amount was. Again, we can jump to a conclusion that it must have been significant enough for it to be June, and Väinö and Kevin, hey, we got to get this off the books.
It has to be a big enough number that you don't want it on the books another
That's
month.
what I'm saying. For another, even another, like, because public perception-wise, had this been October, this goes over completely differently.
Yeah.
It's still weird. The contract's ended early, but it's the off season.
Right.
You know, there'd have been a lot more speculation, a lot more like reasons this could have happened. Mid-season, it's a little interesting. So you have to assume that both players were signed to some large sum of money, which a lot of players were during that window. And Prodigy's probably not the only ones going through this of, hey, we're paying X, Y, or Z player way more than they're worth in the current market. Because when I look back, I did Coffee Break, a live stream Q&A thing I do every Tuesday. I did it this morning, and at that time I had no information. Also, Väinö hadn't left. And I looked back at Kevin Jones' season for 2020. The guy was a top 10 player.
Yeah.
The ceiling was very high. Even 2021, that first year, he was a pretty solid player. Like, all signs pointed to this guy could be a top 5, top 10 guy.
They didn't buy a guarantee, but they bought probably one of, when you consider his marketing value along with his ceiling, they bought one of the best what ifs in disc golf, or like what could they be? So they definitely did invest in that, but I mean, it wasn't a guarantee, and this is just how it panned out.
Yeah, and so at the end of the day, though, the thing that, because is it unfortunate timing here? Yeah, obviously, mid-season. But one of the things that you do have to respect Prodigy for, and I would assume if they did it for Kevin, they're going to do it for Väinö, of negotiating that deal where he had somewhere to land. They didn't have to do that. Is it something where that softens the blow? But what's interesting is they didn't publicize that too. Like, they could have. Yeah. They could have come out and like taken credit for that. Yeah. So there is like at least a silver lining there.
Yeah. And maybe it was just something where they didn't really anticipate negative press. And I've seen Prodigy's been through it. Obviously with the Gannon situation, they dealt with a slew of stuff. I mean, so bad. Like, I've definitely seen them get torn up more. Like with this situation, it was kind of just like, it's because Kevin Jones hasn't been playing well. It's kind of just
Kevin Jones. I don't think they got really drugged through the mud for Kevin.
It was Väinö.
It was Väinö that tipped it over.
But Väinö hasn't been playing that well either. But it was a little bit more surprising, I think.
I think the back to back is what made you go, there's something bigger going on. Like Kevin alone was like, I was on the fence of, this could have been Kevin's decision of Kevin wanting to restart for his career, just something fresh. Like,
tough to say.
Once it was Väinö, it was obvious there's something with Prodigy here. So there's the facts of the matter. Now, what I will say is someone DM'd me before Kevin announced Innova and said, whoever they had, I don't know their sources, he was telling me, I'm pretty positive Kevin's going to Innova.
Yeah.
That same guy DM'd me and said, I'm pretty positive Väinö's going to Innova.
I've been hearing that as well.
So that doesn't mean it's a sure thing. Väinö could end up anywhere. I think Väinö's a really good fit. What I do think for Innova, let's say Innova did land both of them, what they've got now is Innova has a chance if these players do, because both players have very high ceilings, right?
Yeah.
Both players are underperforming to those ceilings. So if the players can just play to what they're capable of, now with Innova Plastic, that's a great marketing move for Innova. And if Innova was able to get them for cheap in today's market, then this could be a steal for Innova at the end of the day. Yeah. I think that's probably the bet Innova's making, at least with Kevin Jones. We know he's there. If Väinö also goes, I think that's probably the bet Innova's making is like, if these players can turn around and get closer to that ceiling where we expect them to be,
right,
then it's well worth our money.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of the layout of it all. Definitely a very interesting thing. And I'll be curious, is this the only one we see?
Yeah.
Of these contracts that were signed several years ago?
And the thing that's really interesting is, as we get further along away from 2020, 2021, especially, a lot of those contracts are going to start expiring, and nobody's gonna make the money. The amount of players who are actually going to make more money on their next contract than they just did if they had a long-term contract there is maybe
probably
nobody.
Zero. Yeah.
But it's going to be very interesting for these companies who are going to have all of a sudden, especially the companies who maybe are still doing pretty well, but did just have a bunch of those contracts. Like, they could get freed up financially. It's going to be, there could be a lot of shuffling around of players. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what companies do. Do companies with a lot of depth, like a Discraft, do they have a bunch of deals end up and decide, let's go for a smaller team and just get the best players? Like, there could be a lot of movement. I think in the next 3 to 4 years, you're going to look back, in 2027 or 2028, you're going to look back and be like, holy cow, look how different the teams were shifted around back in 2024.
Yeah, now I do think what's next for Prodigy, right? Because Kevin, KJ, he's now with Innova. Väinö, we don't know where he's going, but both players, I think, are just trying to get this behind them, move on with whatever their new contracts are, play the best golf they can. Easy. That's like their next step, right? Prodigy, they've been through it, as you said, between the Gannon thing and now this, to where Prodigy, I think, is at a pretty crucial point where they have a few years ahead of them that's maybe an uphill battle of rebuilding brand image.
Yeah.
Because, we talked about this with the Gannon thing. You can look at it multiple different ways. It was a lose-lose situation for Prodigy. But at the end of the day, Prodigy most likely was in the right there.
Yeah.
With how everything shifted out. It just was a PR nightmare.
Right.
And this, it seems like, from what we're hearing, that they had the legal right, and they made a move that they were fully allowed to, and that they fully could. And it might have been a move that it's like, hey, we've got to do this. We don't have an option anymore. For all we know, they could have made this move back in December, and they were like, you know what? Let's hold on and just give them one more chance.
They definitely have been the company who I feel like keeps getting put in the way of really hard decisions.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, they made it, and the problem is they all compounded to where the public image of Prodigy is now painting a picture that Prodigy really wants to change, I think. Yeah. Because, you're hearing, it's not the greatest image, whether it's true or not. It's not the greatest image that has been painted around Prodigy, and I think these next few years it's an uphill battle. But in my head, what Prodigy needs to do is they need to lock in their guy, whoever that may be. And what sucks for them is Isaac Robinson's not even performing up to snuff right now either. Luckily, Ezra has been, but they need to find their guy, lock in.
Those brothers, they need them.
Yeah, lock in, publicly treat them very well, right? I'm not saying financially compensate them very well, but make sure they go above and beyond where other players see how they're treated there, and other players are like, I want to be a part of that. Kind of like back in the day, Dynamic Discs always pitched this family thing, kind of lost it a little bit. But when, at the peak of it, there were players that just wanted to be with Dynamic Discs because of how well they felt treated there at the peak. When Robert McCall was there, when you had Bobby Cool Daddy, Slick Breeze, stuff like that, there was a culture there. I think Prodigy needs to create that culture, and then Prodigy needs to really hone in on their quality control disc-wise. To where they aren't letting stuff out of the factory that has flashing. They figure out what's going on. They might already know, but what's going on with the chalkiness that comes out, to where they really lean into, because they're plastic at the essence. When you get a brand new Prodigy disc, especially 400 plastic, 500 plastic, it's some of the best feeling plastic on the market. That the blend, they need to lock in the quality control, and if they're able to do that and then really lean into the marketing and get new players excited about Prodigy, they could have a very successful brand turnaround. Yeah. But if those things don't go that way, there's certain groups in disc golf right now that's going to be hard to win back to Prodigy. That's the uphill battle for them. So it's going to be a very interesting thing to keep our eye on with Prodigy, because personally, the PA3, the A2, there's some M4. I throw a decent bit of Prodigy. There's some of my favorite discs I've ever bagged. But I'm not going to say that I've never had a 400 A2 that has flashing that I thought might cut me.
It's tough to, and funny thing about Prodigy is their players have had nothing but success.
Yeah.
Guys win guys and FBO players as well. They win with Prodigy Plastic.
Let's just walk down the line. You had Gannon Burr recently with Prodigy.
Mm-hmm.
Isaac Robinson won 2 majors last year. Kevin Jones under Prodigy I think he had a GMC win, maybe even a Pro Tour win. They had Paige Pierce in her prime. They had Katrina Allen in her prime. They had Ricky Wysocki at the beginning of his prime.
Yeah.
Paul Ulibarri, he's kind of reemerged back into his prime, but pre-little Paul Ulibarri slump, Big Germ.
They've always been able to succeed.
Chris Dickerson.
Dickerson was another one recently. They've always had players that can succeed with their brand, but I think, it's a lack of a brand identity because you have to really... If you want to really succeed, at least in the landscape that I see in disc golf, from a marketing perspective, you have to really nail in like a segment of the market. And Innova, they're kind of the giants. They have a lot of the older school players that have been around a long time. Like Innova's kind of got their thing. Discraft was able to capitalize with Paul McBeth, and they just grabbed everybody that came in from COVID. Then you look at MVP. They were able to grab all the Simon. First, they kind of had their kind of cult following, but then they were able to grab all the Simon fans and now all the Simon and Eagle fans. They were able to do that. Everybody's kind of found their thing to latch onto. And Prodigy, they've had a lot of winners, but I think when they first arose, there's some areas of the country still that are like Prodigy country a little bit, but really you look beyond like the European market that they haven't been able to grab onto a certain segment of the US market and really establish it I can't just think to myself, just based on you, I bet you like Prodigy. It's not like, you're a huge Simon fan. Used to be, I bet you throw Discmania. Now it's, I bet you like Prodigy. Oh, you live in this area? Probably throw this. Like they haven't grabbed that segment. And that's kind of what you have to do. And if you can't do that through, just being associated with an area of the country, then you kind of have to do that via the players you sign. And I think that is, maybe what they thought they had with Kevin Jones, and it just didn't work out. And I think that the Robinson brothers are great, but I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be enough, and their success will be enough to keep them where they want to be.
Well, definitely something very interesting to keep our eye on as the years roll on. But there you go. That puts hopefully brings some truth to the situation of what exactly happened with Prodigy or what is going on behind the scenes at Prodigy. Puts a lot of the rumors to bed. I know that way you don't have to get in the rumor mill of what's going on Reddit and Twitter. There's the truth, at least as much of the truth as they want out right now. So it'll be interesting just to kind of watch the rest of the season. Keep an eye on Väinö. Keep an eye on Kevin Jones. Keep an eye on Väinö for that sponsorship announcement too.
They've got 3 different U.S. champions. Will, like in recent times, Will, Dickerson, and Gannon.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive.
And they also have the Champions Cup and Worlds.
They've got a lot of majors.
A lot of majors.
Yeah.
A whole lot of majors. Yeah. So that wraps it up for the bonus episode of Grip Locked. Hopefully that covered enough to scratch your itch, because I can't believe we forgot to talk about KJ yesterday, but now I'm kind of glad we did.
Are silly.
At the end of the day, we kind of knew.
We did know.
Intuition.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah.
We knew.
Bogey Bro intuition always wins.
Always.
We'll see you Monday. Talk to you then.